Hello everyone. Today we will discuss about the hair structure and hair growth cycle. So now we will go for the introduction part. So in case of introduction, where we will learn about what is a hair filament and what can be the shape of hair. So the hair filament is made up of protein which grows from the follicles which is found in dermis or the skin layers, also called pili, or in plural form it can be called pilus. And in case of hair shapes, they can be straight, curly, or crescent moon shaped depending on their cross section, which may be round, oval, and crescent. And now we will talk about the parts included and adjacent to the hair. If we can look close enough to this slide, we can see that there are several layers in the skin, such as epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis, and between these layers the hair follicle is situated, and there is some lengthening fibers of keratin filled with the dead cells, and they are grouped around the semi-hollow medulla, which is made up with cortex. Basically, the hair part which we have seen above our scalp, that is basically a dead part, and all the living element which is beneath the skin, which is basically the hair follicle, and the living structure is called basically the bulb and appears as a white lump at the end of the plucked hair. The bulb surrounds the end of plucked hair, and the bulb lies in the pocket of epidermis as a follicle. Here we can see there is a papilla of the hair, which we can call the blood vessel, which supplies the nutritions to the hair, and there are some melanocyte cells also, which gives the hair its own color. Then comes the center of the hair, which is called hair matrix, and followed the outer cover of the hair matrix is called medulla, and after that the outer cover of the medulla is called the cortex. Now we will go for the next slide. So now we will talk about the hair follicle. It's basically a tiny cup-shaped structure which is buried deep in the fat of the skull. So the follicle is the point from which the hair grows. It well supplied with minute blood vessels, which we can call dermal papillae, and the blood passing through them nourishes the growing region. The temperature around the follicle is normal body temperature and is not affected by the cold or hot weather. And one fun fact is human hair growing can be a little faster in winter than the summer in actual. So continuing the previous slide, we can say the hair follicle has basically two regions. One is hair bulb and second one is special cells. So in case of hair bulb, the structures is basically it is a structure of growing active cells which eventually produce the long fine cylinder of hair, and new cell continuously produce and push the old cell outward. So they grow and develop, they steadily push the previously formed cells, and when the cells reach the upper part of the bulb, they begin to change and they arrange themselves in six cylindrical layers, one inside another. The inner three layers of the cells become the actual hair, and outer three layers become the lining of the hair follicle, which we can call the inner root sheet. And there is some special cell that only found in the hair follicle itself, um, and the cells are melanocytes, which produce melanin, which basically gives hair its own color. In the next slide we will talk about melanin and melanocyte. So basically we will talk about melanin and melanocyte in this slide. Basically the melanocyte is the cell which provides the hair its own color. In humans, melanin exists in three forms. Basically, eumelanin, which can be subdivided in further black and brown, phenomelanin and neuromelanin. Eumelanin and phenomelanin are produced in various amounts of basal layer in the epidermis in cells called melanocytes. The melanocytes are mature forms of melanoblasts which migrates from the neural crest following the neural tube closure. And the melanin is produced with, within the melanocyte. It's packaged in small round membrane bound organelles called melanosomes. The melanosomes are transported from melanocytes to the neighboring keratinocytes via tentacle-like dendritic processes. Basically, the melanocytes have some finger-like or tentacle-like dendritic process, and this will help melanocyte to uh, transport the melanin package to the keratinocyte cell. And after the melanosomes arriving in the keratinocyte, which are basically positioned superficially and which serves to protect from incoming ultraviolet rays. Now we will go for the next slide, which will discuss the So here I prepared a chart which describes the parts of hair follicle. Basically it divided in four parts. First is papilla, then germinal matrix, then bulb and bulge. Now we will proceed to the next slide. This slide will talk about the papillae and the bulb. The papilla is made of connective tissue and blood vessels that nourish the growing hair, and it exists at the very base of the hair follicle. So we can understand from this statement that papilla is itself a connective tissue and filled with the blood vessels, which helps transport the blood, and basically the blood carries the nutrition to the growing hair. So and it is uh, situated at the very base of the follicle, and the bulb is a very cup shaped and rounded structure at the bottom of the hair follicle, and which is called the stocking, and that surrounds the papilla and the germinal matrix, and it is fed by blood vessels. This is the living part of the hair, and in fact hair that is visible above the surface of the skin is actually dead. The bulb holds several types of stem cells that divides every 23 to 72 hours faster than any other cells in the body. The bulb also contains hormones that affects hair growth and structure during different stages of life, such as during puberty or during pregnancy. Now we will talk about the germinal matrix and the bulge. The germinal matrix is also referred to as the matrix where the cell produces new hair as the hair dies and fall out. It also located at the lower region of the hair follicle. The bulge area is located in the middle part, which is called isthmus. Isthmus is a very important term of the hair follicle, and it contains the stem cells which readily divide and regenerate not only new hair follicles but also sebaceous glands and epidermis too. The bulge also provides the insertion point of erector pili, the tiny band of muscle tissue that we all know that with the adrenaline rush, the contraction of the muscle happens, that which causes the hair to stand on when we all get the goosebumps. So not only the isthmus or the bulge contain the stem cells, it also connects with connecting point of the erector pili, which causes which is a basically cause of the hairs to stand on in case of adrenaline rush. And now we will discuss the about the hair shaft in our next slide. So basically, in case of hair shaft, there is a part of hair that can be seen above the scalp. This consists mainly dead cells and that have turned into keratins and binding materials only with small amount of water. Terminal hair on the head lubricated by a natural oil which is produced by the sebaceous glands only. So basically we can see the outer layer is called cuticle, and the inner layer of the cuticle is called the keratin protein, is bounded with keratin protein, which is called the cortex, and the center core of the hair shaft is called medulla. So I prepare this figure where you can see the medulla is the center core part, the innermost layer, and present in large thick hairs, and the cortex is the middle layer of keratin, made of keratin and embedded with the pigment. It also contained air sacs called cortical foci and provides strength, color and texture. And cuticle is the outermost layer, which is outside covering and made up of overlapping scales, thin, colorless, and which serves as a protector of the cortex. So now we will talk about the cuticle. Basically a healthy cuticle is more than just a protective layer. Much of the shine of the hair mm, is comes from the healthy cuticle. Intact cuticle cells are smooth and glossy. So from this figure or this diagram, you can see that healthy cuticles are smooth. They repel the moisture and the dust, excess moisture and dust. If the hair is damaged, then there is a oil loss and external moisture can be entered. And in case of frizzy hair, the frizzy hair is caused by swelling due to the excess moisture contained into the hair. Hmm. So the black hair reflects less light than the blonde hair does. The black hair appears glossier because the bands of reflected light contrast more and with the darkness than the rest of the head. So now we will talk about the cortex into our next slide. So basically the cortex gives the hair its shape. It has two major characteristics. First is melanin and another which is the pigment granules that hair gives it natural color, and cortical foci, which we have talked about before slides in previous slides, which is basically a air space usually found in near the root and maybe found in throughout the hair shaft also. And side bonds of the cortex, side bonds are basically link like the polypeptide chain, which is we all know the long chains of amino acid linked together by peptide bonds and responsible for the strength and elasticity of the human hair. And also there is a hydrogen bond is found, which is basically a weak and physical cross-linking bond that is easily broken by water and heat. And also there is a salt bond which is weak, and also it is a physical cross-linking bond that can be broken by alkaline or acidic solution. And disulfide bond is a very strong bond, and it is a chemical side bond and can be broken by extreme heat, high temperature styling tools, permanent waves, and chemical relaxers. So after finishing up the cortex, we will go for the medulla. So medulla is the hair core that is not always visible, and the medulla comes in different types and patterns. Basically, the center core is not always present in every type of hair. So there is some patterns or types are present. Uh, in case of medulla. So we can from this figure we can find out there is continuous pattern, there is a interrupted pattern, there is fragmented pattern as well, and there is absent, that where the no medulla is visible at all. In case of interrupted, there are few short breaks. In case of fragmented, there are very few parts of medulla visible, and in case of continuous, there is no break in medulla. And also there are stacked type is also there, intermittent or interrupted type is there. Now we will talk about the hair growth in our next slide. So basically, uh, before talking about the hair growth, let's talk about the types of the hair that is found in human body. Basically, there are two types of hair that is found in human body. First is the vellus hair, and another thing is the terminal hair. And in case of the vellus hair is basically short, fine, and unpigmented hair that appears on the parts of the body and that are normally considered as hairless and almost never has a medulla, and helps with the evaporation for the perspiration. And no, women normally retain 55% more vellus hair than men. And terminal hair is long, coarse, pigmented, and dark, present in the scalp, legs, arms, and bodies of male and female. It is usually have the strong medulla in it. And now we will talk about the hair cycle. So basically, hair cycle has three phases. First is anagen, second is catagen, and third is telogen. So anagen is the active growth stage of the hair fiber and can last 2 to 7 years. And any given moment, 80 to 85% of our hair is in anagen phase only. And in case of catagen, sometimes it is referred to the transitional phase, which when the hair growth is begins to shut down and stop activities, generally last for 10 to 20 days. And now comes the telogen. This occurs when hair growth is completely stopped, and at the rest the hair fiber falls out. At any given time, 10 to 15% of our hair is in telogen stage, which generally lasts 100 days for scalp hair. And after telogen phase, the hair process starts over again to the anagen phase. In next slide, we will find the diagram of the hair cycle. So in this diagram, we can see the three phases: anagen, catagen, telogen. So in case of anagen, the dermal papilla and the blood vessels are attached to the hair bulb. And in case of catagen phase, there is a cease of activity of the hair follicle, and the hair follicle basically detached from the hair bulb itself. The dermal papillae detaches itself from the hair bulb, that we can see in the diagram. And in case of telogen phase, the dermal papillae also shrink and the dead hair is falling out. And after falling out a dead hair, the new hair germination is there, new hair formation is there, and when the cycle is starts over to the anagen phase. So this is a scientific diagram which is provided by the Academy of Dermatology of Nevada, and where we can see the dermal papilla, hair medulla, cortex, cuticle, inner root sheath, outer root sheath, and fibrous sheet, and hyaline basement membrane, sebaceous gland, and the whole hair follicle or the hair shaft is in anagen phase only, which is a basically growth phase, where the hair physically grows approximately 1 centimeter per month. It begins with the papilla and lasts from 2 to 6 years. The span at which the hair remains in this stage, the growth is determined by only genetics. The longer the hair stays in the anagen phase, the longer it will grow. During this phase, the cell in the papilla divides to produce new hair fiber, and the follicle buries itself into the dermal layer of the skin to nourish the strand. Over 85% to 90% of the hair on one's head are in anagen phase at any given point of time. So now we will talk about the catagen phase, where the growth of the hair follicle began to cease, and here also the scientific diagram, so we can see the difference from the previous diagram, where there is a thickened vitreous membrane and also the thickened follicular epithelial column is there, and there is a detachment of dermal papilla to the mm, hair follicle, and this is basically a transitional stage where cutting the hair strand off from its nourishing blood supply and signals sent out the body uh, to determine when the anagen phase ends and catagen phase begins. The first sign of the catagen phase is a cessation of melanin production in the hair bulb and apoptosis of the follicular melanocytes. So basically, when the catagen phase starts, the melanin or melanocytes starts to die, and ultimately the follicle is 1/6 of its original length, causing the hair shaft to be pushed outward. And while the hair is not growing this phase, the length of the terminal fiber is out when the follicle is pushes them out upward. So in now we will talk about the telogen phase, and this diagram is also different from the previous one. Uh, so we can see the residual vitreous membrane and the outer sheath, the epithelial strand and secondary germ, and also the papilla. So now uh, it is a shading phase. Basically, the already there is a already hair shaft in the hair follicle which should be pushed outward and falling down. The hair follicle is remain dormant for the 1 to 4 months, and 10 to 15% of one's hair is in telogen phase only in any point of time. So mhm. So at some point the follicle will begin to grow again and softening the anchor point of the shaft. Initially the hair base will break free from the root and hair will be shed. Within 2 weeks new hair shaft will begin to emerge. When once the telogen phase is complete, the this process result in normal hair loss, which is known as shedding. So now we will talk about the conclusion part. So basically the our hair is a very complex structure that is composed multiple layers and structures of various functions, and like insulation, protection and sensory perception, right? Also, why we need to understand these hair growth cycle and hair components, so that we can uh, cure, or we can understand how the hair growth cycle works, which is a very essential part, very important part for the diagnosis and management of various hair disorders that is prominent in these days, where the external factors like pollutions, air, bad weather, bad water are very much prominent. Mm, so the this topic is very much in uh, under research, that how the hair grows and how we can control it. So, so by understanding the hair growth cycle and hair structure, and it is a very essential part for diagnostic and management, how we will manage the various hair disorder like excessive hair growth or hair thinning or excessive hair loss like androgenic alopecia, something like that. So here we can wind up. Mm, So thank you everyone, and now I will display the references. Uh, so there are too many references uh, from where I made this slide, and so I hope you all like the presentation, and thank you very much. See you again.